Imagine you're safe at home, the suburbs quiet and calm, the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens. But what if I told you that behind those glowing windows, something far darker is waiting? A shadow moving where no one should be, footsteps echoing in the dead of night, or masked strangers watching you in silence as you walk through your own dorm. These aren't ghost stories. They aren't urban legends. They're real encounters of people like you who thought they were safe until terror came knocking at their door. Tonight, you will hear the true price of comfort, the true horror of trusting the illusion of safety. Welcome to The Price Paid, where we bring you terrifying real stories that will make you question every sound in the night, every flicker in the corner of your eye. If you want more bone-chilling stories that reveal the darkness hiding in everyday life, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. Because once you step into these tales, you'll never look at your home, your dorm, or your neighborhood the same way again. It was supposed to be one of those rare weekends when everything felt exciting, free, and slightly rebellious. I was 17, still living in my childhood home with my parents, when they surprised me by announcing they were going away for a few days. They were the type who almost never left the house together, the type who seemed permanently attached to their routines. That made this small trip of theirs almost shocking. For me, it was liberation. The house that had always been under their constant supervision suddenly belonged to me. I felt like I had stumbled into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Naturally, I invited my girlfriend at the time, MJ. She had that mischievous streak that could turn the most ordinary night into something memorable. We had been together long enough that I knew trouble followed wherever she went, though I pretended otherwise. The moment her eyes landed on the glowing pool in my backyard, she grinned with a daring suggestion. She wanted us to swim under the night sky without clothes, something I hesitated to agree to but eventually gave into. Her enthusiasm was like gravity impossible to resist. Soon enough, we were splashing, laughing, and feeling the kind of reckless joy only teenagers understand. The pool lights shimmered across the water, the night air was cool, and the large bay windows of the living room made the whole house look like a dollhouse lit up for display. For a while, that view made me feel oddly safe, as if the house itself was watching over us. That comfort was short-lived. I lifted my eyes toward the glass and froze. On one of the far walls inside, a shadow drifted across the surface. It was not a trick of the light. It moved like a person. For a long second, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. Someone was inside. I whispered to MJ that we needed to get out. She must have heard the seriousness in my voice because the playful sparkle in her eyes vanished instantly. I told her to hide in the pool house and not make a sound. She obeyed without question, slipping away silently, her bare feet vanishing behind the small door. Alone, I dried off as quickly as I could, heart thundering, and slipped back into the house. The kitchen was too quiet. I grabbed a knife from the counter, the weight of the steel cold and unfamiliar in my hand, and started moving from room to room. At first, I expected the obvious signs of a break-in. A smashed window, a door left ajar, muddy footprints leading across the floor. Instead, I found smaller, stranger things. A chair slightly pulled out from the dining table, a photo frame crooked on the wall, a coffee mug on the counter that I knew I had not used. These were details that seemed a whisper of someone's presence without proving it outright, as if whoever had come in was toying with me. A rational burglar does not waste time adjusting furniture. The realization left my mouth dry. I pressed forward anyway, telling myself I was protecting MJ, protecting the house, maybe even protecting my pride. But the further I walked, the more that illusion of bravery crumbled. My pulse hammered in my ears. Every corner I rounded, I expected someone to lunge at me. When I finally convinced myself to call the police, it felt almost like surrender. They arrived quickly, searched every room, checked every window and lock. Nothing. No forced entry, no footprints, no broken glass. They left me with the vague suggestion that maybe I had scared the intruder away. I wanted to believe them. I did not. MJ and I barricaded ourselves in the bedroom that night. We pushed furniture against the door and tried to sleep, though neither of us truly did. Around 4 a.m, I woke to a sound that sent cold ripples through me. Floorboards creaking overhead. It was deliberate, steady, like someone pacing. Then came the measured sound of footsteps descending the stairs. My body moved before my mind did. I grabbed the same knife I had kept by the bed and tore into the hallway. By the time I reached the front door, it stood wide open. The night air poured in, as though the house itself was exhaling. Whoever had been there was gone. I did not bother calling the police again. What would they find? Another empty house. Another mystery. Instead, I shut the door, locked it twice, and tried to pretend I had imagined everything. Morning refused to let me. When sunlight filled the kitchen, the truth stared me down. Every single kitchen knife was missing. Gone. They had taken small valuables, some watches, loose cash, a few electronics, but the knives were the part that made my stomach turn. It was not theft for profit. It was something else, something symbolic, like a message written in absence. I could not help but picture those knives in the wrong hands, waiting, patient. When my parents returned, I told them everything. To my surprise, they believed me, though they seemed more resigned than frightened. I tried to act the same, to pretend it had not shaken me, but even now the memory clings like a shadow I cannot scrub away. I was never able to figure out how the intruder had entered or where they hid during the police search. That weekend remains suspended in my mind as a riddle without a solution. A reminder that safety is fragile and that sometimes the most terrifying things are not the ones we see, but the ones that slip past our eyes unnoticed. I can still remember the sound of those footsteps on the stairs, the feeling of staring into the black doorway at night, knowing someone had stood there, watching us in silence. And I can still remember the empty knife block, a hollow space that seemed to grin back at me. That is what unsettled me most. Not the things they took, but the thing they left behind, an unspoken warning that the house had been breached, and that I had never been as alone as I thought. The shadow in the living room window may be gone, but the thought of it remains, lurking like a permanent stain on what used to be home. Rowan University had its share of quiet charm. The campus was nestled in a suburban neighborhood that felt almost too safe. The kind of place where you believed the world's troubles existed far away. Holly Bash, the school's big spring festival, was supposed to be a celebration of that innocence. A night of music, carnival rides, food trucks, and thousands of students crowding the lawn to dance under the lights. It was supposed to be the most fun night of the year. For me, a sophomore still figuring myself out, it was all of that and more. The air buzzed with energy, and for a while, I let myself feel untouchable. I had no idea that night would end with me running for my life. By 2 a.m, the concert had ended, and the rides were shutting down. I lingered at a friend's dorm, laughing and talking, until I realized how late it was. The walk back to my own building, Chestnut Hall, was short and familiar. I had done it dozens of times before, never once feeling the need to look over my shoulder. That false sense of safety was the first mistake. What I did not know was that earlier in the night, a group of masked individuals had been roaming campus, banging on doors, and riding around on bikes. People had been posting about it online, warning others. I had not checked. I had been too busy having fun. When I swiped into Chestnut Hall and pushed through the door, the hallway seemed calm. A few lights glowed, and the air carried that late-night stillness I always found comforting. Then I noticed him, a man sitting in the lounge, completely still. At first, I thought nothing of it. Students were always up at odd hours. But as I glanced again, I realized he was not just any student. He was wearing a black ski mask. Not a casual mask, not something playful, but a full covering that erased his identity. He was not on his phone, not reading, not moving, just sitting, watching. I froze, unsure whether to keep walking or turn back. The silence was unbearable. My brain screamed that something was wrong. Then he stood. It was not slow. He moved in one swift, deliberate motion, rising from the couch and turning toward me. My instincts overrode thought. I ran. My shoes slapped against the tile as I sprinted down the hall and shoved myself into the nearest bathroom, locking the door. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure he could hear it through the wood. I stood there, hands trembling, waiting. I heard nothing for minutes, only silence pressing against my ears. Slowly, cautiously, I cracked the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty. For a moment I convinced myself it was a prank, that maybe I had panicked too quickly. I stepped out, walking carefully toward the other exit, but as soon as the lounge came into view, my stomach dropped. He was still there, still masked, still silent. This time his bike leaned against the door, blocking the way out. A chair was jammed between the wall and the frame as though he had barricaded it. He had not left at all. He had been waiting. I gripped the pepper spray on my keychain and held it out in front of me. I did not shout or threaten, I just showed it, hoping that would be enough. My pulse raced so hard that I could hear blood rushing in my ears. I walked past him, never breaking eye contact. He did not move. He did not flinch. It felt deliberate, as if his stillness was the point, as if he wanted me to drown in the terror of his presence. Somehow I made it through the other door and out into the night. I thought it was over. It was not. The streets of campus were deserted. I was halfway to Magnolia, another dorm building, when the sound of wheels approached behind me. I turned my head slightly and saw 3 more figures riding bikes. They were masked as well, their faces swallowed by darkness, their laughter cutting through the night. They circled closer, taunting me with words I could not make out. The kind of laughter that had no humor in it, only cruelty. My stomach twisted when I noticed the glint of metal in their hands. Some of them were waving what looked like guns. Maybe they were fake, maybe airsoft, but in that moment, there was no difference. Fear blurred everything. They did not touch me, but they rode so close, I could feel the air shift as they passed. They heckled, mocked, and made sure I knew I was surrounded. I kept walking, forcing myself not to run, not to show them how much I wanted to scream. Every second stretched into eternity. By the time Magnolia's lights came into view, I wanted to collapse. I texted my friend to come outside, and when he appeared, the bikers scattered like shadows dissolving into the night. Relief washed over me, but it was poisoned by the knowledge that they had chosen to let me go. That was the worst part. The power had been theirs all along. I did not call the police that night. I was not physically hurt, and I told myself maybe I was overreacting. But the truth gnawed at me. By morning, I called my mom and explained what had happened. She filed a report. Later, some of my guy friends messaged me, saying they had been approached by the same masked group, and that some of them had pointed weapons. No one was injured, but the fear spread fast. Campus police started to take it seriously. Rumors flew. Some thought they were just local kids looking for thrills. Others were convinced they were outsiders with darker intentions. To me, it did not matter who they were. They had invaded my space, the place I slept, the building I thought was safe. Even now, I can close my eyes and see that man in the lounge, motionless, his mask blank and unreadable. I can feel the air from the bikes brushing past me in the dark. I can hear the laughter that was not laughter at all. Rowan's suburban calm had been shattered, and with it my illusion of safety. Since that night, walking home alone is never the same. The silence of empty hallways makes my skin crawl. Every creak of the dorm feels like a warning. I learned the hard way that danger does not always wear a face you can recognize. Sometimes it hides behind a mask and waits until you least expect it. And sometimes the scariest part is not what they do, but what they choose not to do, reminding you that they could return anytime. Amanda's house was the kind of place you only see in magazines. 3 stories tall, a wide driveway, high ceilings, a sprawling backyard with enough space to host a wedding. Her family's wealth was obvious in every detail, from the polished wood banisters to the carefully manicured hedges lining the property. For her friends, it was the perfect place to host an end-of-summer party. For me, it was something else entirely. It was the setting for the most unnerving night I have ever experienced. At the time, Amanda and I had been dating for a while. Our relationship was complicated, sometimes lighthearted, sometimes tense, always caught somewhere between affection and unease. She had a bad habit of being too friendly with other men, something that gnawed at me quietly. When her fellow camp counselors decided her house would be the best venue for their party, I knew there would be moments that tested me. And I was right. From the start of the night, there was one guy who rubbed me the wrong way. His name was Pete. Loud, brash, overly confident, he seemed drawn to Amanda like a moth to a flame, and she did nothing to discourage it. His flirting was obvious. My frustration boiled quietly beneath the surface. I told myself I would not make a scene, that I would not be the jealous boyfriend. Instead, I played a different game. Every time Pete finished a drink, I offered him another. I matched his laughter, his bravado, making him think we were friends. In reality, I was leading him into a trap. My tolerance for alcohol was far higher than his, and I knew if I kept the pace, he would crumble. By midnight, he was sprawled across the basement couch, passed out and drooling. I felt smug, though Amanda saw through me instantly. We argued briefly, her accusing me of sabotaging him, me denying it before half admitting I might have pushed things too far. The tension passed, but the mood lingered like smoke after a fire. The party only grew louder, wilder, and more chaotic as the night went on. I needed a break, so I stepped outside. The cool night air was a relief after the humid, crowded house. I leaned against Amanda's car, staring at the stars, when I noticed something unusual. At the far edge of the yard, half in shadow, stood a figure. He did not move, did not wave, just stood there beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. My curiosity edged out my caution. Fueled by the drinks I had downed, I walked toward him, asking if he needed something. He stepped forward slowly. It was a man, though his features were hard to make out. His voice was low when he asked, "Are your parents home?" The words landed like a blade. It was not just the question, but the way he said it, as if he already knew the answer. Then he repeated it, this time using Amanda's parents' names. My chest tightened. I lied and told him they were inside. He nodded once, muttered a simple okay, and turned away. He did not head for a car or another house. He simply walked down the street until the dark swallowed him. Something about it left me unsettled, but I forced myself back inside. The house was still thumping with music and laughter. I tried to convince myself he had been harmless, just a passerby. Deep down, I knew better. Sometime later, while playing a half-hearted game of ping pong in the basement, I heard the doorbell ring. It struck me as odd, since Amanda had told everyone to come through the back door, the one without a bell. My gut twisted. I excused myself and went upstairs. Amanda was passed out on her bed, oblivious. I shut her door gently and moved toward the front. There I found Bella, another guest, swaying drunkenly by the entry. She slurred something about an older man claiming to be a family friend, there to return something he borrowed. My blood ran cold when she casually admitted she had let him inside. I rushed upstairs to Amanda's parents' bedroom, and the sight confirmed my worst fears. Drawers yanked open, jewelry boxes emptied, the closet ransacked. He had not been lying in wait outside. He had come for something, and he had found it. I told myself he was gone, but as I turned to leave, I caught the faintest shift in the mirror on the back of the door. A flicker, a movement too quick to ignore. Before I could react, he was on me. The force of the tackle knocked the air from my lungs. We hit the floor hard. His hands clawed at my shirt, his face still obscured in shadow. Panic took over. With a surge of desperation, I pushed him off. He scrambled to his feet and bolted, diving through the open window. I rushed after him, in time, to see him land on the roof and drop into the yard before disappearing into the night. I stood at the window, shaking, heart hammering against my ribs. He was gone, and yet his presence still clung to the air like smoke. I called the police, not to catch him but to clear out the party. The chaos had become unbearable, and I wanted control restored. The officers arrived, familiar with Amanda's family, and dispersed the guests without incident. When they left, I woke Pete, told him to get home, and sat in the eerie silence of the aftermath. My body was sore, my mind racing, every detail burned into memory. The next morning, Amanda called her parents. They were furious, though she seemed strangely indifferent, brushing it off with the same carelessness that had always made me uneasy. They did not call the police, insisting it would be pointless without cameras or evidence. To them, the theft was a loss, but not worth the fight. To me, it was something far worse. Someone had known they were gone. Someone had known the house was vulnerable. That was no coincidence. That was intent. I could not shake the image of that man's silhouette beneath a street lamp, the way he asked about Amanda's parents with the certainty of someone who knew them. I could not shake the sensation of his weight slamming into me, the raw violence of it. And I could not ignore Amanda's reaction, or rather her lack of one. Her indifference revealed something I had refused to admit. She was reckless, detached, willing to brush off danger as if it were beneath her. That night did more than steal jewelry. It tore open a truth I had been avoiding. Sometimes, the scariest revelations are not about the strangers outside your home, but about the people standing next to you inside it. Even now, when I think back, I see the empty jewelry boxes, the ransacked drawers, and that open window. I see the moment he asked me about Amanda's parents as though he were testing me, waiting for confirmation. I realized the horror was not just that he had broken in, but that he had planned it, studied them, and walked away into the darkness with no fear of being caught. And I realized the price was more than stolen possessions. The price was trust, innocence, and the thin illusion of safety that shattered forever the night of Amanda's party. Looking back at the three stories, it is tempting to treat them as separate nightmares, isolated events that happened to different people in different towns. A teenage boy in his family's home, a college student walking through her dorm, a young man caught in the chaos of a summer party. 3 different settings, 3 different nights. But the truth that lingers after listening to them is how similar they really are. Beneath the surface, each story carries the same chilling thread: the invasion of safety, the collapse of the illusion that the places we trust most can protect us. The suburbs are supposed to be quiet. Homes are supposed to be secure. Dormitories are supposed to be guarded. Parties are supposed to be carefree. And yet, in each of these cases, that promise shattered in the most unsettling ways. In the first story, the boy thought his biggest concern was whether the neighbors might catch him and his girlfriend skinny dipping. That simple, reckless teenage moment transformed into something sinister when a shadow moved inside the house. What should have been nothing more than an ordinary night became a test of courage and survival. The police searched the house and found nothing, Yet knives vanished, footsteps echoed on the stairs, and the feeling of being watched remained. It was not theft that terrified him. It was the unexplainable presence of someone who seemed to move freely through the walls of his home, who seemed to know exactly how to avoid capture, who left behind not just an empty knife block, but a message of dominance. His safety was not just broken, it was mocked. The second story shifted the stage to a college dorm, a place where thousands of students sleep believing that campus police and locked doors will keep them secure. The girl who walked home that night was not expecting to see a masked man sitting silently in the lounge, nor was she prepared to be circled by strangers on bikes waving weapons in the dark. What made it terrifying was not only the presence of possible guns, or the number of masked figures, but the way they chose to act. They did not strike, they did not attack, they only intimidated. Their silence, their laughter, their calculated movements made it clear that the goal was not robbery or assault, but fear itself. She realized quickly that they were not playing a prank. They were testing boundaries, enjoying the control, and reminding her that she had none. Even after escaping unharmed, she carried the weight of knowing they could have done anything, and that knowledge alone was enough to scar her. The third story showed the danger creeping in through a different crack, one built not from darkness, but from the very light of a crowded house party. Music blasting, drinks flowing, laughter bouncing off the walls, and in the middle of it all, a figure standing beneath a street lamp waiting. The man at Amanda's house was not random. He knew her parents' names, he asked the right questions, he timed his entrance perfectly, slipping in when drunken guests no longer questioned reality. He walked through that home as if it belonged to him, leaving behind drawers ripped open and jewelry boxes emptied, before revealing his presence in the most violent way possible. The narrator was tackled, blindsided, and left with the haunting realization that the man could have done more than steal. He could have stayed longer, hidden deeper, waited until the house had gone completely silent. The party atmosphere had given everyone a false sense of protection, but the truth was that chaos only masked the danger. When these stories are placed side by side, they show a frightening reality. Safety is not about location. It is not about wealth, or gates, or locked doors. It is an illusion that disappears the moment someone decides to test it. Whether in a quiet suburb, a lively dorm, or a sprawling mansion, the horror remains the same. A stranger in a space where they should not be, watching, waiting, acting just enough to remind you that they can. That is the common thread. The sense that you are not alone even when you should be. That the walls meant to shelter you can just as easily trap you. That the familiar can be twisted into something alien and threatening. There is also a psychological terror that binds these experiences together. None of the intruders behaved in a way that matched expectations. A typical thief would smash a window, take valuables, and leave quickly. A prankster might harass loudly, then run away when confronted. But these figures lingered. They left subtle signs, crooked frames, and missing knives. They sat silently in lounges, waiting without explanation. They attacked only long enough to prove they could, and then vanished. This unpredictability is what makes them unforgettable. You can defend against logic, but how do you defend against someone whose purpose is fear itself? Another thread that ties these stories is the aftermath. None of them ended with neat resolution. Police found nothing, parents brushed things off, administrators treated it as rumors. In each case, the victims were left not with closure, but with lingering uncertainty. The boy never discovered how the stranger entered his locked house. The girl never knew who hid behind those masks. The young man never found out how the intruder knew Amanda's parents, or why he targeted them. The horror is not just in what happened, but in what remains unanswered. The absence of truth is its own kind of haunting. And then there is the question of trust. In the first story, the boy trusted the safety of his home. In the second, the girl trusted the dormitory walls. In the third, the narrator trusted Amanda, her guests, the simple idea that a crowded party was shielded enough. Each of those trusts crumbled. Safety was never guaranteed, only borrowed until someone decided to take it away. That realization cuts deeper than the events themselves. Because once you see the cracks in the illusion, you cannot go back to believing it fully again. These stories force us to confront an uncomfortable idea, that horror does not always live in the extraordinary. Sometimes it is not a monster in the woods or a ghost in the attic. Sometimes it is a shadow where it should not be. A man in a mask, a stranger at a doorbell. Ordinary people in ordinary places, turning the familiar into something that will never feel the same again, and that is what makes them so disturbing. They do not just frighten you in the moment. They change the way you see your home, your school, your friends. They linger. The suburbs promise safety, The reality is that safety is fragile, vulnerable, and easily broken. Each of these people paid a price for believing otherwise. They learned that horror is not somewhere out there. It is here, in the places we call home. And once you have seen it for yourself, the illusion is gone forever. What these 3 stories reveal is not just about intruders or masked figures or a stranger at the door. They reveal something deeper, something that cuts through the very heart of what we all cling to. The idea that home, school, or a familiar neighborhood equals safety. For the boy who saw a shadow moving inside his childhood home, safety shattered the moment he realized the walls around him could not keep someone out. For the girl who returned to her dorm after a night of celebration, safety disappeared when silence turned into intimidation, when faceless strangers reminded her she was vulnerable even in her own building. For the young man at Amanda's party, safety broke apart the moment a figure stepped out of the dark and showed how easily trust could be manipulated, how quickly chaos could hide a predator's entry. These are not ghost stories. These are real reminders that horror does not need to be supernatural to be terrifying. A locked door means nothing if someone has already found a way inside. A crowd of friends cannot protect you if a stranger knows how to blend into the noise. A neighborhood of bright lawns and trimmed hedges does not promise peace when danger wears the disguise of familiarity. The suburbs, the dorms, the family homes, these are all places we think of as untouchable, but they are not. The true horror is how fragile that illusion really is. So what can we take from this? First, listen to your instincts. When something feels wrong a sound in the night, a stranger who lingers too long, a detail that does not add up to, not dismiss it. Fear is often your body's way of warning you before your mind catches up. Second, act quickly. Call for help. Lock the doors. Alert others. In all 3 stories, hesitation could have made the difference between survival and something far worse. Third, understand that vigilance is not paranoia. It is preparation. We cannot stop the world from being dangerous, but we can refuse to be easy targets. And perhaps most importantly, we must accept that horror is not always something we can see coming. It hides in shadows, in laughter, in a voice that seems too casual. It tests us when we least expect it. Facing that truth does not mean living in fear, but it does mean staying aware, refusing to believe that safety is a guarantee, because it never is. Safety is only as strong as our attention, and once it breaks, the scar it leaves never fully heals. These are the prices people paid for letting their guard down, for trusting too much in walls, locks, and familiar streets. The question is not whether horror will appear again, but when and whether we will be ready. If these stories unsettled you, if they made you second guess the places you thought were safe, then you have already learned the most important lesson. Never assume you are untouchable. The shadows are closer than you think. This is the price paid. If you want more chilling true stories, if you want to hear the real accounts that make us question the world around us, then subscribe and join us. Because the next story could be yours, and you should know what it feels like to face the darkness when it finally steps into the light.